minutes, and I didn't take that long so that I could take some questions, because this is a thoughtful audience.
You brought up the conspiracy and the recent trial of the embassy law, to get his name, where he was acquitted of 280 counts of murder, but found guilty under one charge of conspiracy, which is resulting in life. And you think that what you're saying, it seems like they added that on so they could have something to nail him.
Well, it's true. It is much easier to convict someone of a conspiracy charge. It is because it's so simple, and it's planning, and it doesn't take tangible evidence. But I really have no more in response to that. Way in the back.
Do you know what gets you the lights more?
Do I know? There's Bill over there who introduced me. Yeah.
I have a question about how precisely is the United States Justice Department possibly going to justify indicting somebody for treason when they are a subject of a foreign prince, Elizabeth II?
Yeah, well, let me just say, it's not treason, it's conspiracy to commit espionage. I mean, we don't know exactly what they're going to indict him on. But a lot of people have asked this question: how can the United States indict anybody who's a foreigner for violating American laws? Well, you know, I'm not going to give you a technical legal answer. I think the general political answer is it's a reflection of empire. We have, I mean, Tom said it all in that these colors don't run the world. The idea is that the colors do run the world, and that therefore we have the right to take anybody we want to and put them into our legal system, but no one else in the world has a right to do that to us. But it's not unprecedented. You know, I think a lot of us have all forgotten the case of Manuel Noriega, who used to run Panama and has been sitting in our jail for a very, very long time. So it's clear that, you know, we feel we can do this, and we have the power to do it. There was a question back there?
Our ACTV would very much appreciate if people, when they ask a question, would stand up and speak quite loudly. So you'll be picked up on the TV.
Yes. Speak loudly.
You never hear of people who get convicted of treason in the last 20 years saying, be executed.
Well, you know,
and they've done some serious, you know, they're spies, they hand over information to our enemies, but we don't do that anymore. Why?
yeah, well, you know, the thing is, the question was, what, you know, you don't hear of people executed for treason. Well, you know, again, I want to emphasize, no one in the United States has ever been executed for treason. My parents weren't executed for treason. They were executed for conspiracy to commit espionage because of the treason clause. Because it was so narrowly defined, the legal authorities have figured out ways to do what in effect is an end run around that limitation and call treason by other names and then convict people of those crimes. And then the Supreme Court, usually at times of political stress, as in the case with the Espionage Act of 1917, reaffirmed the constitutionality of this, even though the attack against it was, you are essentially gutting the treason clause of the Constitution, and that's unconstitutional. But in a 5-4 decision, the court said that's wrong. So, you know, but I think what you are referring to is there have been people convicted of espionage. But what happens in those cases is they're sentenced to prison terms. And that is true. And that is there are complicated issues involved in that, and over the passage of time. But that is true, but it's not for treason. Straight back.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
I want to say a few things. One is the fact that that what happened to your parents was able to happen and what they is really very significant in our history and never to be forgotten. The fact that the WikiLeaks thing came out exactly, and our government's response to it, exactly when the Paine movie came out, I thought was very ironic how, that whole thing was really attached and a very, very interesting juxtaposition. Thank you, Brenda. And the other thing I want to say is, I read your book and it's fabulous, and I do recommend it to everybody. And I also, I'm sorry, but it's very important. It's really a very important book, and your foundation is so critical to our activism, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll say a word about the foundation for just anybody who wants to find out about the Rosenberg Fund for Children more. We have a very, very simple web address. I think we got lucky and got in on the ground floor, www.rfc.org. Very easy to find, rfc.org. And anybody who wants to find out more about it, that's where you go. I know that there are some people who are not online, but you can also find out more about it by reading the book. Okay.
I wonder whether you would comment on the Pollard case?
The question is, would I comment on the Pollard case? Pollard was a conservative supporter of Israel who was convicted of spying for Israel. There are a lot of people on the left who have been reluctant to talk about Pollard or support him because he's a right-winger. He thought he had a deal with the State Department when he confessed to what he'd done in spying for Israel, but instead the government reneged on the deal and sentenced him to life in prison. And he's now been in prison, I think it's approaching 30 years. And my feeling about that is I don't care whether he's right, left, or center. It's been way too long, and we over-imprison people, and it's well past time for his release. And just because we happen to disagree with him politically is no reason to look the other way. Yeah.
Thank you. I was wondering, excuse me, I was wondering if you would care to comment on the difference between the kind of liberal established response to the release of the Pentagon Papers back in the early 70s and the response we're seeing today, like organs like the New York Times, whatever, to WikiLeaks, which has basically been under attack.
Yeah, the question was how to compare the response of the media, mainstream media, to the liberal media, to the release of the Pentagon Papers in the early 1970s, to the response of the liberal media today to the WikiLeaks leaks, particularly such organs as the New York Times. Well, first of all, I mean, I have these terms. I have problems with the terms. I've never considered the New York Times the liberal media. I mean, for me, the Times was complicit in my parents' murder. They refused to publish paid advertisements from the Committee to Secure Justice in the Rosenberg case. They never said a word against the death penalty the entire time. But then 6 months after my parents' execution, they editorialized this glowing editorial about this great liberal judge, Judge Irving Kaufman, who was the good judge who sentenced my parents to death. So my feeling about the New York Times is that while in the early 1970s, they did get behind the Pentagon Papers because there was a split among the powers that be. And there was a segment of very powerful people in the country who thought the war in Vietnam was a mistake and a drain and was causing all sorts of problems, and they were going to help get us out. And you know, the Times just published a 10-page, it was a 5,000-word article on Thursday about their history with Julian Assange. And it is basically a very subtle and clever defense of themselves. How responsible they've been even though they have released this material. And it's also a sort of attack, they talk about, what a jerk Julian Assange is that's the way they put it. I mean, it's not put in those words, but that's essentially what they've done. And so they're trying to have it, we are the responsible people, we are taking courageous stance, but we're not gonna do these stupid, irresponsible things like the WikiLeaks folks. So that's sort of an answer to your question. I think there's also one major difference between the media in general now and the 1970s, and that's corporate control. And there was always corporate control, but now it's much more concentrated. And so it's much worse.
Well, I just want to say, I agree about the hypocrisy of the media. First of all, I think the New York Times owes Julian Assange a lot of money, because almost every day they're reporting on something from WikiLeaks. And ever since they've been released, according to WikiLeaks, so it's in a gold mine for them. Second of all, somebody else made this comparison. The Pentagon Papers really did reveal an unknown history. Secret, that the United States knew from the beginning, that the Gulf of Tonkin was fabricated, and so on. And so they were really a stunning revelation. Not that that defends the difference, but that for the most part, the WikiLeaks are reporting things that aren't secret. It's maybe gossip and more interesting ways of saying how policy was carried out, but basically they've been carrying out the policy of the United States, which is not a secret.
I'm sorry that we have trouble getting people to stand up and turn around and face the camera, but that's what, we're in Amherst, you don't expect people to follow.
I wonder if you felt that the Patriot Act is the government's attempt to extend its power, because they can do a lot of things on the Patriot Act maybe they can't do under this espionage or these other acts.
Well, the answer is yes, and it's part of a constellation of things. One of the things we have to put, the context we have to put the whole WikiLeaks story within is the massive increase in what's considered secret, that the government has classified entire continents of information in the since 2001. So what does the government do? I mean, we think about it. First, it vastly expands what's secret. Then it vastly expands the penalties against people for revealing secret information. And then it charges people who do that with conspiracy, so that if they use the secret information to organize and develop dissent to those very policies which are being kept secret, then you get charged with criminal conspiracies. It all fits very nicely together. And of course, it is all very dangerous, and it of course would make Tom Paine turn over in his grave.
One thing that I found particularly troubling with the WikiLeaks is that the president, that is the Obama administration, ordered college students not to read WikiLeaks. And then warned them that there would be government reprisals if they do comment on WikiLeaks.
Okay, I'm going to cut this off after I'll take one more and then.
Thank you. Could you comment a little bit about the Rosenberg Fund, the families that you're supporting? Are they families of political prisoners of the United States? What have these people done? Is it anything from like the woman that you described who really said something? Is it something more substantial than that? What kind of political prisoners do we have in the United States?
Well, we have a range of political prisoners. Well, in the United States, a lot of the political prisoners that we originally supported, their families, were from where they were Black Panthers, victims of COINTELPRO, Puerto Rican nationalists, people who got imprisoned in the late 1970s and early 1980s. A lot of their kids have aged out. They've grown up. It's been a long time. Some of them are still in prison, but their kids are no longer eligible for support because they've become adults. The new crop of political prisoners turn out to be, well, a lot of them are military resistors, people who refused to fight in Iraq for instance. And they, that's not just speaking, that's refusing to participate in what they consider an illegal war. And then there's also a new crop of what we call green scare defendants, environmental activists who mostly have been charged with arsons and conspiracy and so it's not just speech, but not all of these people are guilty, even though they're charged. And as far as I'm concerned, the United States has used post 9/11 terrorist laws to give enhanced sentences to people. So, somebody might be convicted of burning up an SUV. Now, I don't think burning up an SUV is a good idea. I also don't think SUVs are a good idea. But no, I think not. But I don't think someone who burns up an SUV should be considered a terrorist and be sentenced to 14 years in prison. That is the kind of thing. So we call that, there's a political component to that. So the newest round of investigations may begin to approach the kind of thing that we saw in World War I, and that is the FBI, or I should say the FBI indictments, the subpoenas issued to international support, solidarity activists, peace and justice activists in Chicago and Minnesota, who have been, there's a fishing expedition to say that these people are giving material aid to terrorists. Somebody who's raising money to help children in Palestine or to help labor unions in Colombia. All of a sudden, they're being investigated as giving material support to terrorism. But they're really being investigated and attacked because they're political activists and they're organizing against governmental policy.